Well, this next story talks a little bit about Big Brother. Apparently, Big Brother is not only watching, but he may be listening too, as the feds try to get their hands on more and more cell phone records, sometimes without warrants. Now, these surveillance requests are surging to a whopping 1.3 million last year alone. Now, we should mention these records are new, so there's not a lot of comparisons to be made. But that said, here's some context. AT&T alone says it's seen law enforcement requests more than double since 2007. Judge Andrew Napolitano is here. He's a Fox News senior judicial analyst. I'll get to your text messages and emails in a moment, Judge. But apparently, there's a lack of legal clarity over this about what our cell phone service providers can provide to law enforcement. What does that mean, a lack of legal clarity?
Before 9/11, before the Patriot Act, before the legislation that the federal government enacted after the Patriot Act that made it easier for the FBI to get their hands on our records without search warrants, the legal standard was the same everywhere in the country for local, state, and federal law enforcement. You wanted to listen to somebody's phone calls, or you wanted a record of their phone calls from the phone company. You went to a judge and you presented evidence that demonstrated to the judge that that person probably committed a crime, and that evidence for the crime was probably contained in the records you wanted.
How long did that normally take, that process?
Well, that process can take a couple of minutes. I can tell you personally, from having been there, that I issued search warrants from my living room at 3 in the morning. One of my colleagues issued a search warrant from the back of a motorcycle at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. Judges sit 24/7 to hear these emergency applications. There's a record of what the police are looking for, so there can't be a fishing expedition, and the police are required to produce some evidence before judges sign the search warrants. Much of that, regrettably, changed after 9/11. Because the Patriot Act let FBI agents and other federal agents write their own search warrants, bypassing federal judges, and a lot of local and state law enforcement sort of got jealous of that federal authority, and so they began peppering judges to lower the standards a little bit to make it easier for them to listen to people's phone calls.
So let me stop you there. A 911 call center believes, if they believe there's an immediate threat to somebody's life, right now it can bypass a prosecutor or a judge when it comes to law enforcement. That's one of the things that I've read, and that's why the timing issue, I ask you about that, because there's a certain immediacy with the GPS on our phones and our communication. Before you respond to that, let me just mention law enforcement. The chief of police in Roanoke, Virginia says this: if a victim goes missing and they had a cell phone with GPS technology, would you as a loved one want us to have to wait for a subpoena, have to wait for the court, even though we know that your relative could be in dire straits? What do you say to that?
No one wants their relatives to come within a whisker of death while the niceties of the law are being complied with. That's why judges sit 24/7. I don't know this police chief, and I'm unfamiliar with the system in Roanoke, Virginia. But even in a system as busy as New York, you can get, which is the most complex and highly populated system in the country, you can get a search warrant within minutes if you know what you're doing. I would also say that we're not going to lessen the protections of the Constitution in order to make the police work a little bit easier. The police work harder, they'll save lives, they'll comply with the Constitution they have sworn to uphold.
What's the risk if we bypass that step and continue to do so?
A very slippery slope. The risk will be, what laws will we let the police break next? Now, I know you're dying to see what my last email was. Dear Jenna.
I want to see it for myself.
Okay.
John, this is what it says. XOXO. If I had a nickel for how many of these emails I got from Judge Napolitano. I mean, it really...
Do you blame me?
But you wouldn't mind if the police saw this. National television just saw this.
Well, you have just given up my right to privacy, whether I wanted you to do it or not.
You better take the phone back. You never know what's going to happen next. I might take a look at more of those emails, Judge.
It is a serious issue. We run the risk of going down the slippery slope of losing, with every tick of the clock, more of our rights if the police don't abide by the Constitution.
Interesting to see some of that power in a 911 call center in a local police agency rather than through a judge. And we'll talk more about this as we